State folks, I wanted to just speak very briefly about our keynote for this afternoon. My deputy director, Greg Davidson, I think he was here earlier, he may still be here now. I saw Jack speak out in DC and was just floored by his presentation, and I think he'll be extremely challenging to the folks in education in the room when he speaks and the topics he talks about. But he is really a futurist, he's a trendsetter, he has been published in the Wall Street Journal and Business Week. He is sought after by the business community. He normally appears on CNN, MSNBC, and National Public Radio. So with that, I wanted to see, where is Jack? Is he backstage? And he's probably on his way up here now. I want to introduce Jack Uldrich, our keynote for this afternoon.
Thank you. Oh, here, I need John, I need the clicker. I do. No problem. All right, good afternoon. If we could pull up my presentation here. I am going to be speaking on the need to unlearn. This is a picture of Lao Tzu. He's an ancient Chinese philosopher, and thousands of years ago he said, to attain knowledge, add things every day. And I hope in this presentation to add to your knowledge bank. But he said, to attain wisdom, subtract things every day. And it's my contention that your world is changing so fast, but before many of you can embrace what's coming next, you're going to have to let go, subtract, and unlearn some of the things it is that you think you know about education. The next most common question I get after people hear my bio is, well, what is it that a futurist does? And that's a great question, but rather than tell you what a futurist does, I want to show you what a futurist does. And I know that many of you have already seen this video. In fact, I suspect that some of you use it in your classroom. But I'm still going to show it to you again anyways. And what I want you to do is I want you to count the number of times people in the white shirt pass the basketball. It can either be a bounce pass or a chest pass, and whomever gets the correct answer will get a signed copy of my latest book, Foresight 2020. So does everyone understand what I'm asking? Count the number of times people in the white shirt pass the ball. Here we go. All right, could I see a show of hands? How many people counted 15? Anyone count 15? Okay, a few of you did. What about 16? Okay, more of you. What about 17 or some other number? Okay, everyone who said 16, please stand up. 16 is, in fact, the correct answer. Now, remain standing. Unfortunately, I don't have books for all of you. So, as a tiebreaker, and now only the people who are standing can answer this next question, but whomever I see raise their hand first with the correct answer will get the book. So of the people standing, who could identify 3 other changes in that video? Any of you? What about 2? Okay, the most obvious one? Yes, sir. A gorilla. Congratulations. Afterwards, I will give you the book. Could I just see a show of hands how many other people saw the gorilla? Okay, so it looks like about 20%, but 80% of you didn't. But even those of you who saw the gorilla, there's something else that you missed. So let's just see what else you missed here.
Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold.
So I told you I was going to show you what a futurist does. Look, I gave all of you an incentive to focus on a very specific task. And in your day-to-day jobs and responsibilities, you're similarly incented to focus like a laser on your specific job responsibility. As a futurist, however, I have the luxury of stepping back and looking at the big picture. And the first thing I like to remind my audience is there's this 800-pound gorilla in the form of new emerging technology that's walking front and center into our lives. It's beating its chest saying, I'm going to transform virtually every aspect of education from K through 20 and beyond, but most of us don't see it. But beyond that, certain jobs and certain industries are fading away. It's kind of like the person in the black shirt just walking away. We don't pick up on these because that's not where our attention is. And then customer behavior and student behavior is changing in some really subtle ways. It's like the curtain changing colors. But we don't often see all of these changes, and what I want to do in the first part of this presentation is just draw you back from your day-to-day world and help you see how fast your world is changing, because this will open up the need for why you might need to unlearn some of the things it is you think you know today. So the next thing I want to do here is I want to help you think a little bit like a futurist. And this was the theme of a book I wrote a couple of years ago called Jump the Curve. And when I wrote it, I came across a wonderful quote from Albert Einstein. And decades ago, he said to scientists and other very bright people, he said, if you can't explain what you're working on to a 6-year-old child, you're a fraud. I thought, wow, that's a really great quote. Well, it just so happens I am blessed with a son. This is a picture of my son, Sean, and when the book came out, he was only 6 years old, and I wanted to see if he could grasp what I meant by jump the curve, because I need you to grasp this concept. And I didn't know how to do this, but one day it came to me. He was very excited. He'd lost his first tooth. And I thought, oh, I'm going to teach my son how to jump the curve. So I said to him, imagine the tooth fairy comes to you this evening and presents you 2 different options for your teeth. And it is a fact that all babies have 20 teeth. Option number 1, tooth fairy is going to give you $5 per tooth. His eyes get really big. I go, hold it, wait. The second option is you're going to get a penny for your first tooth, 2 for your second, 4 for your third, and that penny's going to double 20 times. Which option are you going to take? Without batting an eye, he goes, I'm taking the $5, Dad. That'd be $100 in total. I go, okay, fair enough. But do you actually know what your 20th tooth would have been worth under the last scenario? Sheepishly, he says, no. I go, well, as your dad, I'm about to tell you, it would be worth $5,242.88. To which he promptly says, no way. And as his dad, I say, yes, way. But I then said, look, son, let's plot that penny out, doubling on a graph. Early on, the doubling looks insignificant. 1 penny, 2, 4, doesn't really look like it's going anywhere. But after just 20 doublings, that curve shoots up. So if he would have wanted to understand the implications of the tooth fairy's offer, he would have had to jump that curve to understand what the 20th tooth would have been worth. So that's why he needed to know how to jump the curve. The reason you need to know how to jump the curve is because today there are now 10 technological forces that are doubling anywhere from every 4 to 24 months. It is computer processing power, it is data storage, it is bandwidth, it's the sequencing of genes, advances in biotechnology, nanotechnology, 3D printing, sensor technology, robotics, the collection of data. All of these trends aren't just creeping up linearly, they're shooting up exponentially. So the first thing, if we really want to start thinking about the future and the future that we are preparing our children for, we have to recognize we're just at the lower left-hand part of this curve today. Where we're going to be in the not-too-distant future is a decidedly different place. And let me just give you an example. So from this point forward, one of the things I want to say, as a futurist, everything that I now tell you isn't off in the future. Everything I'm about to tell you is already here today. Your challenge and our challenge is to understand how each and every one of these trends is only going to get exponentially better. As I was walking into the hall, I saw someone wearing this technology. How many of you know what this is? Sebastian Thurn was here last year wearing it. It's Google Glass. These are glasses that you can wear, and it is as though the computer screen is right in front of you. But it might interest you to know the world's first surgery with a surgeon wearing this device just took place 2 months ago right here in Columbus, Ohio. Here's what they were able to do.
As Caden performed surgery on the east side of Columbus, a colleague collaborated from his office across town. And on Ohio State's main campus, a group of medical students saw this historic event from a completely different perspective.
So is that going to change how we educate medical students? I suspect it is. But again, my point to you is this is where we were in late 2013. I think it only stands to reason that this technology is only going to get better, faster, and more affordable. So the question then becomes to you, how do you start thinking about this technology that we know it's going to be commercially available this year? How might this allow us to start innovating in some powerful ways? But as a historical analogy, and as a futurist, I find history just very illuminating to help us think about the future. I recently came across this video. This was the first newscast on the internet in 1981.
Imagine, if you will, sitting down to your morning coffee, turning on your home computer to read the day's newspaper. Well, it's not as far-fetched as it may seem. In fact, both local San Francisco papers are investing a lot of money to try and get a service just like that started. Science editor Steve Newman reports on one person already using the brand new system.
17 stories up in his fashionable North Beach apartment, Richard Halloran is calling a local number that will connect him with a computer in Columbus, Ohio.
A computer in Columbus, Ohio. That's where we were 30 years ago. Of course we have made extraordinary progress, and this looks laughable today. My point to you is Google Glass, in 10 years, what it's doing today is going to be equally laughable. But we have to jump the curve and understand where these trends are headed. Here's another way I want you to think about the future. If something doubles just 10 times, it's not 10 times as big, it's 1,000 times as big. So my son's 10th tooth was worth $5.12. 10 doublings later, over $5,000, 1,000-fold increase. The reason I mention this is a lot of people will come up to me and say, oh, Jack, we're not going to see 1,000-fold increase in anything anytime soon. I go, you know what? Think about this. The very first conference of this organization was held 16 or 17 years ago. 16 or 17 years ago, Google was just 2 guys with 3 computers. Today, it's a pretty impressive corporation. It's transformed media, advertising, education. It's getting into healthcare. Why it's even getting into transportation. My message to you is we've experienced 1,000-fold increase, and we're going to continue to experience 1,000-fold increase. And let me just give you a couple of examples. Just last year, Cisco came out with a report that said that mobile web video communication is going to grow 250-fold in the next 3 years. So what might this mean? How might you want to jump the curve? Well, let me give you an example outside of the education industry. In the retail industry, Tesco is a British grocery chain, and they saw this trend. They said, well, how does it affect us? And here's what they said. They want to expand internationally. Specifically, they wanted to expand in Seoul, South Korea. But they couldn't open stores there because land was very expensive. But they said, oh, mobile web video communication is exploding. What that allows us to do, and what they've now done, is they've created virtual grocery shelves on the walls of subway stations so that commuters, when they get off the subway in the morning, can literally grocery shop on their way to work with their smartphone, press the app on their button, the order's then sent to the Tesco warehouse on the outskirts of Seoul, and the groceries are packaged and delivered to their home or apartment by the end of the day. That's how a retailer is exploiting this technology that is coming. The question then becomes to you as innovative educators, how do you similarly exploit this technology? And let me give you one example. Over in the UK, a very new institution called FutureLearn has said, we're taking mobile e-learning to the next level. We're tired of trying to bring students into and onto our campus, and what we're going to do is we're going to use mobile web video communication to bring education to where they're living their lives. That's how they're trying to jump the curve. What could you similarly do with this technology that we know is going to get 250-fold more powerful in the next couple of years? In order to keep you engaged late in the afternoon, I know it's been a long day, I'm going to keep asking you some questions, and I will give a book to whoever gets the answer to this question. So the question is this. What do these numbers have in common? There's some mathematical relationship. 1,000, million, billion, trillion, quadrillion. Anyone know? Raise your hand if you think you know the answer. Nope, not people on the internet. What was? Not the number 1? I'm looking for some other mathematical relationship. Yes, sir. Each one is 1,000 times bigger than the next. Congratulations, this book is yours. So remember, I said, if something doubles 10 times, how much bigger is it? It's 1,000 times bigger. So if there is a technology and it's going to double 10 times in the next decade, and there are going to be some, what that means is if we're in the ones today, we're going to go to the thousands in a decade's time. If we're in the thousands, we're going to go to the millions. If we're in the millions, we're going to go to the billions. And I'm going to walk you through some 1,000-fold increases that are coming our way. But before I do that, let's just step back 6 years in time. 6 years ago, how many of us knew what apps were? None of us did because they didn't exist. Today, there are over 1 million. It's a $25 billion a year global industry, and 500,000 people are employed in this industry that didn't even exist 6 years ago. Again, we've lived through some remarkable change. It makes it a little more possible to understand how we're going to continue to live through extraordinary change. But I recently came across this analogy that might help you think about the future in a new way. I'm almost 50 years old, and if any of you are my peers, back in the day when we were young and we'd go to a lot of concerts and we wanted to bring the artist back out for an encore, what would some of us do? Woo! We would hold up a lighter. Just why some of us had a lighter, none of your damn business, but it looks like a couple of us did. Well, as my kids were very young, my wife and I, they're now teenagers, my wife and I didn't go to a concert for a decade. We went to one a couple of summers ago, and the big difference was what? Kids were holding up cell phones. Like, oh, that's curious. And then we went to another one this past summer, and the kid next to me had downloaded a Zippo lighter app on his phone, and he flicked it open, and he lit it. And let's see if I could get it. He was like, woohoo, come back out. And I looked over, and I just thought, well, that's just weird. But then I thought, no, that's a great metaphor for the future. Look, we're still going to do the same things we have always done. But how we do them as a result of the smartphone or Google Glass or whatever is coming next is going to change in some curious ways. Yes, we're still going to grocery shop. Yes, we're still going to consume education. But how we do it as a result of some of these devices is going to change in some curious ways. So when you see these curiosities, instead of dismissing them, say, what might there be that I'm just not seeing? How could I use these curiosities to think about innovating into the future? So let me just now walk you through some other technologies that are doubling. I've written a couple of books on nanotechnology, not going to bore you with the details, but here's what's interesting to know. So 3 years ago, it was a $100 million a year global industry. Today, it's about a $10 billion a year global industry. And how many of you have seen Samsung's new phone? If any of you have seen this? It's a brand new phone. It has self-repairing nanomaterials in it.
In their video, they scratch the phone up and down on the back next to a regular backing. Then after 2 minutes of sitting, the G-Flex actually completely heals, almost, while the regular phone is, of course, still scratched. Now,
so that's pretty cool. But again, that's where we are today in 2014. This field is going to transform medicine, energy, a whole host of other sectors. And by the end of the decade, it's expected to be nanotechnology, a $100 billion a year global industry. From 100 million to 100 billion, that's another one of these 1,000-fold increases that's walking right through our lives. And do you think that this is going to affect some of the career choices a lot of your students make? Absolutely. Let me give you another technology that is growing exponentially. How many of you are familiar with 3D manufacturing, 3D printing? It's the physical printing out of objects. It might interest you to know, up in Winnipeg, Canada, of all places, we've already printed all of the exterior components of an automobile. That's where we were in 2013. General Electric has said by 2017, we're going to be printing aircraft engines wherever we need them. So think about this. Today, the manufacturing sector, often we go over to Asia and other parts of the world for low-cost labor. We produce these parts. We then put them on a ship. We transport them across the Pacific Ocean. We bring them into Long Beach. We put them on trucks, and then we deliver the parts to wherever they're needed. In the not-too-distant future, we're going to be printing parts right where we need them. And this is going to transform the manufacturing sector. So again, my point is the lives of a lot of your students, particularly those who are considering careers in the manufacturing industry, have to be aware of these trends because they're growing exponentially. Robotics is another technology that is doubling. Today, think about this. There are thousands of robots that are being deployed on battlefields, in hospitals, on farms, and others. How many of you saw 60 Minutes right before the holidays? Any of you see Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, is already experimenting with flying robotic technology to do what? Well, here's what they're working on. So that's where we are, again, today. It stands to reason these technologies are only going to get better, faster, and more affordable, and they're going to explode out. How many of you know what this is? That's right, it's a Google self-driven robotic car. It's now legal in 3 states, in California, Florida, and Nevada. And Google has demonstrated on over close to 1 million miles of California freeways and roads, their technology has not yet gotten in an accident. Pretty impressive. I recently came across this video. This is someone getting into a self-driven car for the first time. I thought it was funny, and I think that you might get a kick out of it.
What?
It's driving itself.
The reason I show you that is because that's exactly what I think the future is going to feel like to many of us, just downright frightening at how fast it is coming. But again, the point I've been making, this is where we are today. Robotic technology is only going to get exponentially better. And of course, it's going to transform a wide variety of industries. And we need to be thinking about how we prepare students and ourselves for this future that is coming. Next trend that is growing, the number of computer chips, sensors, radio frequency identification chips that we're putting into our environment is doubling. Today, there are millions, but if it doubles for the next 10 years, we're going to go from millions to billions of sensors. I'm from Minneapolis. Some of you might remember 4 years ago we had the tragic bridge collapse. We rebuilt the bridge in record time, but when we rebuilt it, we embedded 400 sensors in that bridge to tell us a whole host of other things. So that's just what we're doing now with all of these sensors is we're connecting physical objects and even ourselves to the internet. Could I just see a show of hands? How many of you either have or know what Fitbit, Fuel Band, or Jawbone is? So many of you already have it. I wear one. What is this? It's sensor technology that tracks our physical activity and our sleep behavior. And in a sense, it is connecting our activity to the internet so that we can better monitor it. Well, we're just at the early stages of this revolution. The term you're going to start hearing more and more is, this is called the Internet of Things. And people are saying that this is a $15 trillion business opportunity in the coming decade. But let me just give you a little glimpse with the help of Cisco as to what is coming in the not too distant future. This is a commercial they recently began airing.
Trees will talk to networks, will talk to scientists about climate change. Cars will talk to road sensors, will talk to stoplights about traffic efficiency. The ambulance will talk to patient records, will talk to doctors about saving lives. It's going to be amazing and exciting, and maybe, most remarkably, not that far away.
Not that far away. Why? Because we're also embedding sensors directly in tablets and e-books. And what this allows us to do is we can see how long a student is engaged with a particular text. We can see which video she does or doesn't click on. We can find out when she rewinds. All of this sensor technology is then helping us come to new insights as to how she is learning and how we might be able to deliver personalized instruction specifically to her. So here's how the Internet of Things might affect even people in the education industry. Another trend that I just find this one personally interesting, that is, it's going to affect all of our lives, gene sequencing technology getting better every 4 months. So here's what this means, and here's a good way to think about it. So 7 years ago, this fellow said, I want to sequence my genome. Well, he was a billionaire and he could afford to do it because 7 years ago it cost $150 million to sequence your genome. But technology getting better every 4 months, which means the price is being cut in half every 4 months. And if you cut $150 million in half, starting in 2007, something remarkable happens. And it follows this path perfectly. By the end of 2012, the price had dropped to $10,000. By the end of December 2013, the price had dropped to $1,000. Pretty impressive, but get ready for this. By the end of the decade, it's going to be more expensive for you to flush your toilet than it is to sequence your genes. That is extraordinary, and it's going to profoundly transform healthcare and the pharmaceutical industry, but here's just one way to think about this. How many of you remember this past summer when Angelina Jolie decided to have a double mastectomy? Any of you remember that news report? The reason she did that is because she sequenced her genome and it told her she had an 87% chance of getting breast cancer. She said, I'm not taking the chance and I am doing it. My message to you is, what did the sequencing of the genome mean to her? It empowered her to make better, more informed decisions. And that's exactly what all of us are going to be able to do within just the next couple of years. And how we think about our health and what this means for the healthcare industry is going to be nothing short of profound. Next technology, 1,000-fold increase. I always like to mention this one because a lot of us, because we have smartphones and laptops and tablets, we like to think that we've lived through the computer revolution. We're about a fraction of the way through the computer revolution. I'm going to give you a couple of ways to think about this. How many remember 3 years ago when IBM's supercomputer went on to Jeopardy? Crushed Ken Jennings, the all-time human champion. That computer was capable of 70 trillion calculations per second. I could not wrap my head around that figure a couple of years ago. I still have a hard time doing it today, but I called up the head of a supercomputer center in my home state, and I said, say, I'm writing an article. Could you help me put 70 trillion in some perspective? And being a university professor, and no offense to those of you who are a university professor, he said to me, he said, no, I can't do that. And the bastard hung up on me. And under my breath, I was kind of cursing him, but to his credit, he called me back. And a couple of hours later, and he said, I've thought about what you asked, Jack, and here's how you should think about it. He asked me my age. A couple of years ago, I was in my mid-40s. He said, so when you were in college, all you had was a handheld calculator. I go, yep, that's all I had. He goes, well, if you would want to do 70 trillion calculations on that tool, and that's what many of us had 25 years ago, that's all we had. He goes, it would only, and he used the word only, he goes, it would only take you 60 million years to do what this machine does in 1 second. That's a little humbling, but IBM already has a computer capable of 1 quadrillion calculations per second, but it's not going to stop there. A Japanese company just came out last week and said, oh, by the end of the decade, we're going to have a supercomputer capable of 1 quintillion calculations per second. So what that means is the computers are going to be 1,000,000 times more powerful than what Watson was just a couple of years ago. And here's what Watson's already doing.
Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center and IBM are at the forefront in building new technology that will use IBM Watson and complex analytics to better treat cancer patients. With medical information doubling every 5 years, finding new ways to make evidence-based decisions has never been more critical.
That's pretty impressive, but again, it's just the tip of the iceberg because the tools are about to get anywhere from 1,000 to 1,000,000 times more powerful. But of course, it's not going to stop there, and here's another way I want you to think about this. Could I just see a show of hands? How many of you now have on your possession the tragically outdated iPhone 4S? Some of you still have that on you. So it came out just 18 months ago, right? But it's already outdated. But when it came out a year and a half ago, what was the latest, greatest advance on it? Siri, artificial intelligence. You can ask your phone a question, it gives you an answer. It does a pretty good job, but it still makes some silly mistakes. Well, I think that most of us can grasp the idea that yesteryear's supercomputer is now packed into this device. It's a little more difficult to grasp that today's supercomputers are going to be packed into the smartphone or the Google Glass or whatever's coming next of the near future. So what might that mean? Well, here's what it means. It means we're going to go from a world where we ask our devices questions and get answers to a world where our devices know ourselves, our surrounding, our environment so well that they tell us things that we need to know before we even know to ask the question. And if you don't believe that, watch this video.
What could this tell me about impending trouble?
Well, we're working on a project that will take a nanosensor in the bloodstream that is smaller than a grain of sand, and it will pick up a signal when you have cells that are coming off, shed into the bloodstream, coming off from the artery lining, which is the precursor to a heart attack. And then you will get on your phone a special heart attack ringtone.
A special heart attack ringtone. Doesn't that sound insane? I don't know about you, but if I actually got a heart attack ringtone, I'd probably have a damn heart attack. But my message to you is, it might sound crazy from today's perspective, but this fellow's understanding of advances in nanoscience, computer processing power, and sensor technology tell him that that vision isn't way off in the far, far future. It could be here by the time your freshmen graduate as seniors. That's how fast this future is coming down upon us. So that's my quick walk through the future. Now what I want to do is transition a little bit more into this unlearning concept. And I open with this slide. As soon as you recognize what's wrong with this card, raise your hand. Just look at it, and there's something blatantly, patently wrong. Keep looking at it, and as soon as you recognize what's wrong with it, raise your hand. Okay, so in the interest of time, what is it, someone? That's right, the color is wrong. It's a spade. It should be black, but in this case, it's red. What's interesting, it takes about 85% of all people, it takes about a minute to recognize that's what's wrong. But here's what's curious, is if before I ever put that photo up, if I came up to you and said, would you recognize a red spade? Most people quite confidently say, oh yeah, I would pick up on that instantly. But that's not what happens for the overwhelming majority of us. The metaphor is this, and there's a reason why. I mean, when we have learned something from the beginning, we've always seen spades as black. So powerful is that old paradigm, even after the world has changed, we don't pick up on it. The metaphor is this, is that your world, the world of education and higher education, has already changed. And it is as odd as a red spade, but you might not be seeing all of these transitions. But you have to start becoming aware of them if you want to embrace the future. And let me just give you a couple of examples. I suspect some of you have seen this video, but I came across this about a year ago. I'm just going to set it up by saying that this young girl is 11 months old. I'm going to show you the video, then I'm going to tell you why I found it so interesting. So you're looking at the video, and she's saying, well, dang it, my finger works. She goes, whatever that thing is, it's not doing it for me. She is then given an iPad, and she's immediately happy. Now, when I saw this, my jaw hit the ground, and here's why. Here's an 11-month-old child who's still in diapers, but she's growing up in a world where she what? She expects to interact with information. And if it doesn't interact back with her, she's not doing business with it. These are your future students. These are your students today. These are your kids and grandkids today. So here's the one thing that we can't do in this new world where the rules are changing. We can't be like Grandpa in this particular video. Hopefully you'll get the point.
The what not to do with an iPad file comes this German clip. Never mind watching young children with expensive toys. This is a convincing argument to watch anyone who thinks wireless is still another word for radio.
Okay, so we know that the rules are changing and we have to be open to them. I know that many of you are already familiar with MOOCs, massive open online courses, but the important thing to remember here is, and I'm surprised at the literature, some people are saying this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, others are already dismissing it, saying, nope, the science is already out and students are not learning from MOOCs. What we have to understand is we're just 18 months into this game, that this technology is in the experimental stage. From my perspective, it's going to continue to be iterated and experimented with and ultimately improved upon. A year ago, Sebastian Thurn was here and he was talking about Udacity and he was saying it's going to revolutionize the world. He came to an epiphany and he said, you know what? It's not quite as revolutionary as I thought. And the people a lot said, see, even he doesn't think it's all that good. He's dismissing it. He's not dismissing it. He's now just pivoting, and they're using Udacity to do what? To focus on vocational education. They're now partnering with AT&T and Georgia Tech to deliver a master's degree in computer science for about $6,500. But that's just the start. They've now created something called the Open Education Alliance, where they're working with other employers to say, how do we use all of this these massive open online courses to better train our workers. Your world is already changing, and how many of your students are being prepared for the workforce of the future is wittingly or unwittingly being taken out of your hands in some cases and being put into others. So now I want to delve a little bit deeper into this idea of unlearning, and to set this up, I'm going to ask all of you a question. And what I want you to do is I want you to turn to your neighbor and answer for your neighbor this very simple question. What two colors are the yield sign? Turn to a neighbor, someone close to you, and tell them what two colors the yield sign is. Okay, so those of you who said yellow and black, congratulations. That was the correct answer up until 1971. The yield sign has been red and white since Richard Nixon was in the White House. I'm sure some of you go, no way, that is not true. Yes, as a matter of fact, it is. The first yield sign you see after leaving the convention center will be red and white, and curiously enough, every other one all the way home will be red and white. The metaphor is this, is that, look, it is a fact that years ago, yield signs were yellow and black. The problem is, for many of us, that old, crappy information has just stayed stuck in our head, even in the face of overwhelming visual evidence to the contrary. The reason I tell you this is that there are similar things that you learned about your profession or about your industry that, yes, they might have been true yesterday, but they're no longer true today. So here's what I'd like you to do. And first, let me just stop. Inevitably, I know someone after my presentation will want to come up to me in the hallway and say, well, in my rural area of Ohio, they're still yellow and black. No, they are not yellow and black anywhere in North America, and they have not been for decades. So don't go hanging your hat that your local community is somehow unique. It is not. And if you're absolutely convinced it is unique, I'm going to put up my email address and my LinkedIn connection information at the end. Take a photo and send it to me. I've been asking this question for 6 years. No one has ever sent me an operational yellow and black yield sign. So here's what I'd like you to do, if you did get this question wrong, is the next time you see a red and white yield sign, which will be the next time you see a yield sign, I just want you to think to yourself, how might my world be changing and I'm just not seeing it? If nothing else, use this question as a reminder that we all have to stay humble, that not everything that we think we know is necessarily true. Because if we're going to unlearn, and we do need to unlearn, one of the first things is just to have humility to the idea that not everything that we think we know is necessarily true. Now, those of you who said yellow and black, I'm not done with you yet. If you're a little curious as to what your brains look like, here's what your brain kind of looks like. So that's what it kind of looks like. So looked good back in the day, but it might be time for a little mental wardrobe update. So that's a lighthearted example, but let me just give you one example where I still think a lot of people, not everyone, but some people need to do some unlearning. I talk to a lot of people about social media, and one of the reactions I get from about half people sort of my age or older is go, social media, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, it's all just a colossal waste of time. I don't have time for this nonsense. All of those websites, they should just merge into one super time-wasting website called UTwitface. It's like, I'm trying to educate people. I do not have time for this nonsense. And if that's your impression of social media, I'm going to give you a little visual metaphor that might hopefully open your mind a little bit. This video clip is about 30 years old, but this fellow was given a then new technology. He thought he understood how it worked, but let's just watch what happens. So I think we can all agree, look, if you don't understand a new technology, you might mistreat it. And I think that some of that is happening with social media. If that one didn't work for you, I'm going to go a little further back in time and show you this clip. So again, those of you who think that social media is just this colossal waste of time are doing the metaphorical equivalent of looking at this new tool and maybe just dismissing it early. I know that some of the innovators who were recently awarded are already doing this, and I suspect that many of you are. But those of you who aren't, this could, in fact, be a really powerful tool. But before you can embrace it, you might have to let go of some of your assumptions about what really makes a good pedagogical tool. And let me just show you one. Again, MOOCs are only 18 months old, but Google and others are now creating a new website where they're putting virtually all of these high-quality online courses online for free, and they're opening the courses up to you to use and then modify however you see fit. You might be dismissing social media, but I can tell you some of your peers are not, and they might be doing a better job educating their students than you are that are not using these tools. Here's another question that I think humbles not everyone, but a lot of people. A few years ago, I wrote a book called Higher Unlearning, and one of the questions I have in the book is, it's very simple, but it's in very general terms, why does it get hot in the summer? What happens in relationship to the earth and the sun? And interestingly enough, some innovative researchers decided to pose this question to Harvard graduates on commencement day, arguably one of this country's more elite academic institutions. And here is what the Harvard graduates said. And two of these three are science graduates.
Okay, I think the seasons happen because as the Earth travels around the sun, it gets nearer to the sun, which produces warmer weather, and gets farther away, which produces colder weather, and hence the seasons.
How hot it is or how cold it is at any given time of the year has to do with the closeness of the Earth to the sun during the seasonal periods.
The Earth goes around the sun, and it gets hotter when we get closer to the sun, and it gets colder when we get further.
So essentially, these Harvard graduates are saying, well, the reason it gets hot in the summer is because the Earth gets closer to the sun. Now, intuitively, that might feel like the right answer. After all, if you step closer to a fire, you get warmer, but it's the wrong answer. And most of us learn in 4th or 5th grade, it's why does it get hot in the summer? The Earth tilts. My message to you is 98% of all Harvard graduates got that question wrong, and a similarly percentage of Americans also get it wrong. Why? It's because they allow their intuition to override scientific knowledge. My point is, there are things that feel like they're the right answer to you, but you need to have some humility. Again, not everything that we think we know is necessarily true. And let me give you one example. How many of you have watched TED Talks and know who Sagatra Mitra is? I'm just going to show you this short clip, and I will explain what he's doing, but he does a pretty good job.
Embedded a computer into a wall of a slum in New Delhi. The children barely went to school. They didn't know any English. They'd never seen a computer before, and they didn't know what the internet was. I connected high-speed internet to it. It's about 3 feet off the ground. Turned it on and left it there. After this, we noticed a couple of interesting things which you'll see. But
the interesting thing that he noticed is that these students, with no outside instruction, were educating themselves to the 8th grade standard in both the US and the UK. My message to you is this: intuitively, it might feel like every student needs a teacher, but maybe that's not the case. Now, my message is not to say that teachers are not needed. That is not what I'm saying. But I think we do have to start appreciating we're all innately curious, and many of us can educate ourselves to some extraordinary standards if just pointed in the right direction. But my broader message is we always have to challenge our intuition. Just because something feels right, it might not necessarily be right. Here's another way I want you to, hopefully it'll help you unlearn some of the things that you think you know. I'm going to show you a little video clip, and what I want you to do here is I want you to tell me which way you see the dancer spinning. Could I see a show of hands? How many of you see her spinning clockwise? Some of you? Okay, so about half. How many of you see her spinning counterclockwise? Okay, some of you. How many of you have actually been able to see her spin both directions? So about 20% of you. This is a mind-blowing idea. She's actually spinning both directions at the same time. And many of you are not going to be able to see it, and this is going to drive you crazy. It took me 5 weeks. Every week, every day I would go back to the website. It's like, I don't see it. She's just spinning clockwise in my case. And this is similarly going to drive many of you crazy, and you're absolutely convinced that she's just spinning one way. I'm going to make my presentation available to whoever wants it, so if you still can't see it, you can study the video clip later. But I am going to help you scratch this mental itch, and here's how I'm going to do it. It's often been said that if something looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it is a duck. And undoubtedly, you will all see a duck there. But what else do you see? A rabbit, that's right. And if you can't see a rabbit, I cannot help you. No, I'm just kidding. If you can't see a rabbit, instead of imagining a duck's bill, think of those as ears, and then the creature is looking off the other direction. Hopefully all of you can toggle your brain back and forth. 1 second it's a duck, the next it is a rabbit. It is not the picture that's changing, it's your brain that's changing. And that exact same phenomenon is happening with the spinning dancer. Why do I show you this? The reason I show you this is a couple of years ago, the American Management Society looked at what makes successful leaders in academic settings, in business setting, not-for-profit government, and one characteristic rose to the top. Do you know what that characteristic was? It was a leader's ability to embrace ambiguity. Often we think the world is black or white, it's a duck or a rabbit, she's spinning this way or that way. That's not the case. The future is changing so fast that one of the ways that we can embrace it is by embracing ambiguity. Things are rarely black and white, and if we want to prepare ourselves and our students for the future, we have to start doing a better job of helping them embrace ambiguity. And let me give you an example of where this might be needed. I'm reading a wonderful new book called Smarter Than We Think. How many of you remember, this was about 12 years ago now, when IBM's then fastest computer beat the world's best chess player? Do you remember that? Over a decade ago. And people said, that's it. Computers have mastered chess, and a human will never again be able to beat a computer. And that's true. But interestingly enough, you know what can beat the world's fastest computer? A human aided with computers. The basic premise of this book is that technology is not a love-hate relationship. In fact, we might be able to use technology to make us better teachers and instructors. But before some of us can embrace that, we're going to have to embrace ambiguity. Technology in and of itself is neutral. Some cases it can be good, others it's bad. But we have to figure out where it's bad to stay away from it, but embrace those areas where it can help us do what we're already doing, but do it better. And let me give you an example. Most of you, I'm assuming, are familiar with Khan Academy. Could I just see how many of you know? If you don't know what Khan Academy is, please find out. But what are many innovative teachers already using this technology to do? Those of you who don't know, Solomon Khan has now produced close to 4,000 videos, high quality, mostly on math subjects, but he's branching out to a variety of other fields. But every month, close to 5 million students are using his videos to educate themselves to some extraordinary standards. But now a lot of people will say, Khan Academy, that's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Other people will say, that's true. Other people will say, no, it's bad. Again, from my perspective, we all have to embrace some ambiguity, and wherever we think that something is good, true or false, we have to learn to view the world from a different perspective. And how are many teachers now using Khan Academy? They're using it to flip the classroom. They're saying, instead of us lecturing up here, you go watch his video, and then in the classroom, I'm going to help you with the homework. They're embracing ambiguity, they understand, they're experimenting with these technologies, and I think that we're going to have to do the same thing. So we all have to have some humility, and like great leaders can embrace ambiguity, we also need humility. And so how do we become more humble? Well, here's one of my suggestions is I came across a wonderful quote, 7 words. It says, give up on answers, stick with questions. And if you want to unlearn or to be open to unlearning, here's a really powerful question. It's a difficult question, but those of you who ask it and then really think through it, I think are going to benefit from it. And it is this. It's what I call a pre-mortem. And the question is this. It's 10 years in the future, and I'm no longer doing what I did, or my school is out of business. Ask yourself this question, and counterintuitively, what might asking this question do? It's going to help point out areas where you might be vulnerable to change. Once you find out those areas where you're vulnerable, what can you do? You can start preparing for the change that is coming down upon us. And let me give you a great example. I just came across a quote from the dean of Oxford University. And he said in this article, he goes, we are not in the business of online education. We're 800 years old. We're the world's oldest university. That's not what we do. Well, fair enough, but Harvard, MIT, and a lot of others are now putting their quality content online for free. And a lot of people say, well, that's never going to compete with the on-campus experience. Well, don't be so sure. And here's a little historical metaphor for you. How many of you saw this news from this last fall? After 244 years, what did Encyclopedia stop doing? Printing their paper encyclopedias. And why is that? It's because they were essentially disrupted by a group of people. We don't even know who these people are, but there are millions of them, and they're adding things to this encyclopedia, but we don't know their bona fides, we don't know their academic credentials, but yet they've somehow been able to produce a high-quality encyclopedia. People working for free, that idea would have seemed insane to them 10 years ago. My message to you is, especially in the world of higher education, people educating themselves or people taking free online courses, it might not seem that practical today, but short-term history reminds us big change can happen faster than most people appreciate. Another thing I encourage all of you to do, hopefully most of you are familiar with this famous optical illusion. You either see the profile of a young woman or the face of an elderly woman. And I like this as a metaphor because I think what all of us have to do is get a reverse mentor. I think for too long, many of us have assumed that mentors are just older and more experienced. It's the equivalent of just being able to see the elderly face. But in this world that is changing so fast, many of us, especially those of us who are a little bit older, I think have to pivot 180 degrees and get reverse mentors, people who are younger than us, who see the world through a fundamentally different lens, and who understand these tools in ways that we might not necessarily understand. So if you don't have a reverse mentor, go and get one sooner rather than later. Now, let me just give you a couple quick examples. I know it's been a long day, so I'm going to ask everyone to stand up. And I'm going to try and weave some of these themes together. I want all of you to watch me as closely as possible and do exactly what I do, okay? So put your hands up, put your hands out, clap them together, flip them over. Everyone take your right hand, put it over your left. Okay, everyone, this is your right hand, okay? Now, if you are sufficiently flexible, interlock those fingers. And now lower your arm. And now, if you're even more dexterous, tap those fingers together. So, do you promise you are all watching? Because if you are all watching, every single one of you should be able to quickly, simply, and elegantly, and without rotating your shoulders at all, rotate those fingers 180 degrees to the top. How many of you can make that simple motion? Or are many of you somehow suspiciously locked up? Like, what the hell? And you would have to go all the way over to do it. All right, have a seat. I'm going to show you what just happened, and this has a metaphor. And I know if I don't show you the trick, half of you are going to be under the chair for the next couple of minutes. Like, how did that guy do that? Well, here's the trick, and you can go back and do it to your students or your colleagues. And say, watch me as closely as possible and do exactly as I do. Put your hands up, Put your hands out. Clap them together. Flip them over. Take your right hand, put it over your left. And everyone does that right, but even if they do it right, and here comes the trick, you go, no, 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 your right hand. You distract everyone. 99.9% of all people watch that hand. That gives you the opportunity to turn your hand that way. It's a fairly awkward motion, but if you practice it, you can do it. And then that allows you to do that. But if you don't see it, and 99% of all people don't, they're like, what? Do that again. Why am I showing this to you? Well, it has a metaphor. And I'm hoping after this presentation you will say, well, that was a good presentation. That opened my mind to the idea that tomorrow is changing. I fear, however, what's going to happen is most of you are going to go right back to your day-to-day job, and you're going to focus on what you have always focused on. What I'm trying to tell you, if nothing else, give yourself permission on a regular basis to step back, to read, to think, to go out to the edge, find out about these trends. Why? Because your world is changing constantly. And if you don't start picking up on these subtle changes, what's going to happen? Your thinking, your institutions, your students are going to get locked up. If you pick up on these trends, you're going to be flexible, adaptable enough to steer yourself and your students into the future. So if nothing else, give yourself permission to step back and think about how fast the world is changing, because it's changing really fast. A number of institutions are already going to self-paced learning. Another example, other institutions are going to credentialing to say, maybe academic degrees aren't that important. What we want to do is we want to know what skills students have today or workers have today. One way to do this is to give yourself a think week. And I can already hear some of you thinking, who does this guy think he is? I don't have a time to dedicate a week just to thinking. But then I want you to think about that statement. Essentially, if you're saying you don't have time for a think week, what you're saying is you don't have 2%. You can't find 2% of your time to think about the future. Well, if you're not thinking about the future, who exactly is? And if a week is too much, break it down into an hour a week, 12 minutes a day. I don't care how you do it, but there are some great sources. But here's what you have to start doing. You have to start seeing these trends and then start thinking about how they're all converging. Let me just give you one example. Just last year, Microsoft came out with this new voice language translation technology.
There's much work to be done in this area.
在这方面有很多工作要做。
So that then translates English into Chinese with a 3-second delay with 98% of accuracy. That was last year. It's already up to 99% accuracy, and there's only a second delay. But of course, that technology isn't going to just stay there. Google Glass app developers, and there's a woman here wearing Google Glass, they're now working on a new app that would allow you to travel anywhere in the world, see signs in a foreign language, and have that sign converted to your native language. But that, of course, then isn't going to stop. How many of you know what this is? Project Loon. Project Loon is a moonshot project by Google. What they're doing is they're launching sophisticated technology up into the upper atmosphere. The whole purpose and the goal is to deliver high-speed internet access to all 7 billion people on the planet by the end of the decade. So think about what that means for education. Suddenly, if we can communicate to anybody in their own native language, and we can see the words translated on print instantly, and everyone on the planet has access to these tools, what then does that mean? We need a lot of people thinking about these types of trends because they're coming sooner rather than later. So think about how fast the world is changing. Another thing to help you unlearn is experiment. If I were to ask you, are you more likely to get hit by a car in a crosswalk or while jaywalking, what would you say? Most people say crosswalk, but you're actually 100 times more likely to get hit in a crosswalk. Why is that? Many of us somehow assume that yesterday's rules are going to protect us from forces beyond our control, but that's not true. Here's what I want you to take away from this. But if you're, and now I'm not advocating that you all do jaywalk, but if you do jaywalk, what are you doing? You're more aware, you're more vigilant. The metaphor is this, is that the riskiest thing all of you can do is to play it safe, is to somehow think that yesterday's rules are protecting you. The safest thing for all of you to do is to start taking some risks. And the metaphor for educators is this. I came across a study about a year ago. An innovative ceramics teacher split her class in half, and she said to one half, she said, in this 9-week course, you focus on making the most perfect piece of pottery. And then at the end of the 9 weeks, we'll come back and we'll evaluate it. An independent group will evaluate it. To the other half, she said, iterate, experiment, fail as much as you want, but you have to come back with a final product. At the end of 9 weeks, which group do you think actually had the higher quality product? Yeah, the one that could experiment, iterate, and fail. And that is my message to you. None of us know what the future of education is going to look like. But what we do need are innovators who are going to experiment, try things, and do others. Why? Because at the end of the day, in 3, 5, 10 years, they're going to have a higher quality product than those who are just trying to focus on getting everything right. And there are people experimenting. Over in Wisconsin, they're now saying to workers, they're saying, we're going to give you college credit for your real-world experience. You never have to set foot on a campus because we value what you've already learned in the workplace. Oregon and others are saying, you know what, there might be new ways to fund students. The legislature has not passed this, but instead of charging tuition, what Oregon is exploring doing is taking 3% of their graduate salaries for the 7 years after they graduate. I don't know if that will work or not, but it's innovative, it's experimenting, and it might lead to a better model in the future. It might not, but it's a risk worth taking. Now, let me just quickly wrap up with this last question and sort of tie everything together, and I'm going to give away another book to whoever can answer this question, because here's how I want you to think about the future and why you still might need to do some unlearning. If I were to, I want all of you to picture a lake that you're familiar with, okay? And let's just spring ahead a couple of months, and let's say it's the first day of June, and there's a single lily pad on this lake that you're thinking of. If you're thinking of a big lake, the lily pad will be bigger. If it's a smaller lake, the lily pad will be smaller. But every day in June, the lily pad doubles. So on June 2nd, there are 2. June 3rd, there are 4. The day after that, there's 8, then to 16, to 32, to 64. Keeps on doubling, and on June 30th, then that last day, the whole lake is covered. Can everyone kind of picture that exponential growth? Okay, so I'll give the book to whoever gets the answer within 1 percentage point. So on day 20, 2/3 of the way through this doubling exercise, what percentage of the lake is covered with the lily pads? If you think you know the answer or just want to wager a guess, raise your hand and shout out the answer. Anything? Yes. 20? No. 50? No. Who said? Did someone say 1%? Yes, if you did say 1, you get the book, sir. You're within 1%. You're actually still a little high. Do you know the more precise answer? The more precise answer is 1/10 of 1%. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are going, what do you mean 1/10 of 1%? You just stood up here for the last hour or so telling me how fast the world is changing, and you're telling me the lily pads only cover 1/10 of 1%? Yes. In fact, this is exactly what I'm trying to tell you, because what else did I tell you? If something doubles just 10 more times, and that's what will happen from day 20 to day 30, how much bigger does it get? It gets 1,000 times bigger. So here's what happens. Even by day 25, we're just a little over 3%. It's not until day 29 that we get just over 50. But of course, once over 50, boom, the whole thing is covered. Why do I show you this? Well, I suspect that some of you are going, well, Mr. Future Man, if the world changes as fast as you say it is, how come my world feels pretty much the same? Well, the reason your world might feel the same is, first, these technologies have, in fact, been doubling. But what you have to appreciate, we're just at day 20. The really big change is just ahead of us. That is the future that is coming down upon all of us. This is the future that we need to be preparing our students for. This amount of change is going to require us to jump the curve, but it's also going to require an inordinate amount of unlearning. And so another metaphor is this. A lot of people think, oh, I've got plenty of time to prepare for all of these changes. No, you don't. This future is coming fast. And we need to be open to it. Now, I know I've just dropped a big bomb on you, so those of you who are a little nervous, I just want all of you to take a deep breath, and I want to remind you we've lived through this, and I can prove it to you. How many of you can remember the hit movie from 1987, Wall Street? Any of you remember that movie? If you did, Michael Douglas played Gordon Gekko. He's this high-powered Wall Street guy, and to show he's a high-powered Wall Street guy 25 years ago, what device did they show him using in the movie? That's right, they showed him using that danger, but if you can just act and create your own future, you're going to be able to create a future that is incredibly bright. So thank you for all you do, and thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Great job. Great job. Appreciate it.